the trust markers of these brands, all of those things will increase together. And we are seeing that. In 2 clicks, I should be able to check out with my address being pre-filled and my card being there and so on and so forth. Good 3-4 billion dollars of GMV going through D2C channels by these brands. We obsess over a 100 million revenue target. It's just been extremely product tech driven. So you would expect that with 600 brands, there will be a large team solving for it. I think in total, all these three things are done by 6-7 people at best. For the first year, the product was very straightforward that, hey, all your problems of checkout with respect to conversion, we will solve. It was that straight. Just hold us accountable to that number. Most of our brands within a certain duration, let's say 3 or 5 days of onboarding, were able to see a very quick impact. People like us as buyers don't have a lot of time to think about a purchase. I feel like the India bet is a long-term bet. You can't be impatient with this market because when it blows up, it will blow up. Non-trivial it is to predict intent to buy as well, right?
Welcome to the India Opportunity Podcast. Hello and welcome everyone to the India Opportunity Podcast. Our guest today is Ishan, co-founder of Shopflo, a widely used checkout infrastructure platform for D2C brands. If you've shopped something from a consumer brand recently, there's a high chance that you've used Shopflo to complete your purchase. They're that deeply embedded in the consumer landscape. Shopflo came into the limelight when it announced a seed round in May 2022, led by Tiger Global, and has been rapidly scaling across India and the US ever since. Previously, Ishan was working on the investment team of Elevation Capital, investing in the fintech sector. And before that, at EY. He's also co-founded an impact initiative called Project Awaaz to empower visually impaired Indians. He is an IIT Bombay graduate and is building a phenomenal business with Shopflo. So much so that it's become one of the most loved checkout platforms for consumer brands. We talk about all things fintech, building for India and the US markets, evolution of digital commerce, and a lot more. Excited to share this deep dive on the fintech infrastructure space with all of you today. Hope you enjoy watching. Hi, Ishan. Welcome to the India Opportunity Podcast. Thanks for coming on board. How are you doing today?
Hey, Shrishti, thanks for getting me here. It's a wonderful start to the weekend, honestly, so can't be complaining.
Yeah, thanks for doing this on a Saturday morning and making time for this. Ishan, let's start from the big announcement that caught everyone's attention in the ecosystem. And that's when probably they first heard about you as well. You raised $2.6 million from a huge fund called Tiger Global in 2022. Of course, at that time, single-click checkout companies were raising insane amounts of funding globally. And given you were on the investor side at Elevation Capital before, what opportunity did you see that made you take the big leap going back to being a founder?
Yeah, no, that's honestly an interesting one. So very, very circumstantial, honestly, and I'll give you some background, right? So while I was at Elevation Capital, I used to look at fintech investments, and I was seeing and fintech and obviously B2B, so some SaaS was also there. I was seeing that all of a sudden, obviously there was a theme of verticalization that people were building for specific verticals. So you would see people building for banks or people building for very specific regulatory institutions and whatnot. But somewhere in 2020 or 2019, we were seeing this rise of software plays extremely verticalized for e-commerce. And that made us very intrigued about what's really happening here, because for most of us, e-commerce stops at Flipkart and Amazon, and probably now the Zeptos and Swiggies of the world. At that point of time, the concept that there is this wide, huge ocean of direct to consumer brands was also fairly new. Not a lot was really sized, mapped, and understood well. But we were seeing that people who were deep into this knew that there was this huge wave of brands being started up. And that really happened, honestly, on 2, 3 different grounds, right? We were seeing it was so easy to start a brand now. You could just plug in, let's say, a Shopify with a payment gateway and Facebook and Google. You have people coming onto their website. You don't even need to manufacture your own products.
Yeah.
And you just list something up. If you're able to build a good brand, scale distribution and optimize some of the supply chain piece, you're sorted. You have some margins flowing in, and then you can take it forward from there and build a crazy huge brand in a space that you are passionate about. So the barriers to create a brand and build a company in e-commerce were very low, and that continues to go down further and further as we speak,
Yeah.
which really just opened the floodgates for everyone who was passionate about something or the other, right? I keep talking to a lot of people in my friend group also today, right? They're just passionate about, let's say, pets. Yesterday, I met someone who wanted to build for pet supplements.
Yeah.
Um, Probably long back, you would start having second thoughts around, hey, probably I don't come from a business background, or I'm not meant to do this, or I don't know how to do this. Today, those thoughts are not there.
Yeah.
They go in for it and then figure out that how big do I really want to make it. And that's the mentality shift that's happened. On the other hand, what we were seeing was, and that's still a very early growth story for India, that's on the consumer side.
Yeah.
So we were today, I don't know, about 1.4 billion people. Let's say 80% of them have great mobile behavior that we are observing, powered by internet and what, let's say, Geo and the ecosystem has done around it. And then there's so many strides that India has taken in terms of fintech. That probably like 600, 700 million people are frequent transactors on UPI.
Yeah.
This entire bulk, obviously, the share will keep on increasing, but this bulk of users are yet to sort of adopt online commerce really well. In fact, back then when we started, the food delivery market, especially, was being focused and also powered by a very small group of 20 million users. So
Yeah.
think about food delivery then and food delivery now. We were saying that, hey, the same sort of a growth should come from direct to consumer channels as well. More people will start sort of buying directly from websites, given that their comfort on transacting online, the trust markers of these brands, all of those things will increase together. And we are seeing that. Earlier, there were probably the same 2 million, 3 million people who would go to a brand, let's say just probably a Zara website.
Yeah.
That base has become, 40, 50 million very quickly. And there is still a headroom, 90% headroom remains on the back of how many people are, let's say, payment transactors online. So we are seeing this giant wave from both sides, and we realize that there will be a mismatch in the consumer expectation that these people are used to. As a consumer, I'm awestruck with what quick commerce apps and these fintech apps and the experience my ride hailing apps are giving me. But when I go to your websites, I don't care if you're a tech company or an e commerce entrepreneur, I'm expecting the same kind of treatment.
Yeah.
And when I don't get that, I either lose trust on you as a brand, I judge you, and probably I don't convert. So that was one broad theme that we were seeing that will happen when these two waves collide with each other. And it felt like there was a good vacuum to sort of facilitate this handshake. This handshake in e-commerce happens in checkout, and that's when we started kind of focusing on that. But yeah, that's broadly how we looked at this opportunity then.
Very interesting. You obviously spoke about some of the inflection points that you were seeing, but at that point, like you were saying, that the market of transacting users was very small. So, did you do any kind of mapping? Because, given you were on an investment team at Elevation, I'm sure you must have thought about what is the market size really that I'm going after? What is my TAM? So, how did you think about that at that point?
So honestly, Srishti, I think there is a very non-VC answer to it that I have. I feel like after a certain point of time, we remove the bias of spreadsheets in our head, right? Of some of these things, you just naturally expect that they would happen. Only a disaster would say, and probably like, a repeat of COVID or some global level catastrophe can stop innovation to increase convenience, right? Otherwise, if the tools are there, the adoption will happen. That's broadly how we were looking at this market. So honestly, we didn't really size the market then and there. It didn't make sense. We had to size it X years down the line, and that light at the end of the tunnel was too damn strong. So we just took the leap of faith, and we knew that India is going to be an emerging growth story for the next decade or so. And the broad trends that we were creating our thesis on were very long term trends, right? And those honestly have proven correct so far. So we continue reinforcing our belief in this direction.
Yeah, that's very interesting, right? And it's also very contrarian because these days the advice loosely thrown around is that, you need to know your market size that you want to operate in.
Yeah,
But what you're touching upon is that, it's very important to spot these inflection points.
yeah.
And, as long as the trends are leading in that direction, it doesn't matter. Eventually, the market might get created as a journey of evolution. But tell us about that process of discovery that, honing in on consumer brands. What was the experience like of working with your first few consumer brands? Who were those customers and how did you start working with them?
Yeah, honestly, it was a very long drawn process for us to, like, none of us had really done operational stuff in this industry before. Um, so thankfully, I think Priya, who's my co-founder, he used to look at D2C investments while at Elevation. So there was this captive group of buddies and mentors that we had in the industry and continue to have, who were in general allowing us to be a fly in the wall in their conference room discussions. And those gave us extremely mouth-watering insights, honestly. Like when you ask someone what problems you're facing, probably you won't get the right answer or you won't understand the weightage of those answers. But when you're in the office of these brands, just sitting day in and day out for extended periods of time, and understanding what is really causing a lot of friction and the fights internally, that's when you really start understanding, hey, you know what, this is actual pain point that needs to be solved. So we spent a lot of time working in and sitting in these offices of these mentors and friends and family as well, and learned a lot of nuances that people were struggling with. Largely, the theme from an internal point of view that we saw was brands are hungry for growth, right? Like you have a product today. It's not technology that you're waiting for that will take your product to the next level. It's demand you're waiting for,
Yeah.
right? Today, if you're selling a particular cake variant, tomorrow, if you just scale the ads, your sales go up like that. You just have to do it sustainably well and build a brand in the process. So they are hungry for growth. They were very focused on what they wanted to build for which kind of user, and how they wanted to sell. They were very deep insights they also had on what is stopping people from converting in a particular part of the funnel. But there was a sense of helplessness that we saw when it came to implementing some of these changes, experimenting with some of these things. For example, discounts. People were just struggling with the basic construct of discounts that their platforms were providing them. Most people in India have not cracked loyalty in some sense because
Yeah.
multiple problems to it, right? The platforms that power e-commerce today are used to be and are continuing to be very email password heavy, which the Indian customer doesn't understand. So what's the point of pushing for a wallet or a loyalty product if I have not even identified you? So a lot of these problems were existing, and there was this helplessness because there is so much dependence on tech. The other thing we realized that even the folks who have figured out, let's say, a solution out there in the market, SaaS built for e-commerce has traditionally been very low quality. It's
Yeah.
either you have to get a custom designed solution by a services company, and then there is obviously the problem of dependency and that, and perhaps quality there as well. But otherwise, there are these tons of apps built by solopreneurs and part-time developers just put on these platforms like Shopify and WooCommerce plugins and whatnot that technically are supposed to support you through crores of sales. So all of this thing, when we were sitting there and seeing what people were struggling with, led us to believe that there is a premium that can be charged by building a high quality product that solves these specific set of problems. And that was the first attack point when we pitched this thesis as well as our belief to some of these folks at the end of our experience sitting around their offices and talking to their people. We had honestly spoken to around 120 odd brands in the short period of 5 months. Um, but the amount of insights and the quality of insights were too deep for us to resist building in this space. A lot of these people started pushing for either being part of the journey or immediately pushed for a POC. And that's when we got a few friends together and said that, hey, let's just build in that direction and see what happens out of it.
That's very interesting. I want to deep dive into some of the nuances that you mentioned. So, for example, email versus mobile numbers, right? That
Yeah.
is a very India specific deep insight
Yeah.
that you would have probably identified by talking to these consumer brands. But, having been inside these offices, because, first pain point discovery is also so important. And
Yeah.
you were fortunate enough to be in these rooms. So, what were, say, the top three, five problems that the consumer founders were facing that they needed immediate solutions to? Because it sounds like there was an immediate pull from them. So what
Yeah.
was that offering or the pain point that you were able to solve or were thinking about solving at that point?
So honestly, the problems were a lot. Like people struggle with like everything that they touch has a massive problem, and most of their current operations as well as marketing runs on patchwork and figuring out, playing whack-a-mole with whatever problems pop in front of them. So we were seeing problems with respect to shipping. We were seeing problems with respect to payments. They don't have control over payment failures. Shipping timelines are quite skewed and off, and the expectations are unclear. So people would even buy from them, and because for the sake of conversion, they would give a no questions asked refunds and returns guarantee. They would also buy from an Amazon, which will deliver faster, and then these people would incur a loss. People were facing struggles with discounts, that hey, sometimes for a new product I don't want this kind of a discount to stack over another discounts. The concept of stackability itself was extremely impossible to execute for them. So very basic stuff, honestly. At the core of it was the fact that there was a trade-off between conversion and the ability to identify users. What you said, right? Like if I pop in a login field in front of you, almost like you don't read a lot of news articles if they ask you to enter your email address and then unlock some subscription and whatnot. And you're like, okay, I'm good without the news. That same behavior is in e-commerce as well. And that trade-off was hurting them because you can either understand who the customer is or just be behind a blindfold and just transact and forget about who the customer was and so on and so forth and allow people to check out as guests. So there was this common thread that a lot of these problems could have been solved if there was a better way to identify the customer. At the core of it, there was also this feeling of resignation that, hey, as a D2C brand, perhaps I'm going to get this customer max to max once a year. So how do I even justify putting this point of friction to even understand more things about a customer?
Yeah.
Uh, and that's where we realized that there is a lot of benefit that marketplaces have because there is this concept of identity management that they have perfected, right? My Amazon sign in is a legit sign on that I can use somewhere else as well. But it gives me the comfort that when I go from a Google ad, click on this product, which is on Amazon, in 2 clicks, I should be able to check out with my address being pre filled and my card being there and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And perhaps in the process, I'll see some good things that are recommended, especially to me. So that was the common thread that we picked on while the problems were many. And we realized that building an identity layer of e-commerce is the need of an hour. If we are able to do that, a lot of these problems can be solved in the long run. And that's essentially how we narrowed down on the specific piece within checkout as well.
Super interesting because obviously, I think people take it for granted now that checkout experiences have become so seamless thanks to companies like Shopflo and others, that people don't even understand that just 5-6 years ago brands would struggle to get access to customer data, and like you were saying, most of the preferred way of checkout would have been shop as a guest. right?
Yeah.
And for a long time, I think investors were also telling the founders that, build your businesses on marketplaces, and because there was actually no way to get customer data. So, and
Yeah.
this whole shift which has happened in the industry, that website sales, you should focus on driving that, and reduce your focus on marketplaces, which is the conversation now, has
Yeah.
only been able to happen because of the checkout infrastructure, market booming like that, right? So, and I think a lot of that is taken for granted because at a consumer level you still don't fully appreciate it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And a little bit of this story is also homogeneous across geographies, right? So it was, as you said in the introduction part itself, that we were seeing some of these problems being recognized and good businesses also being created out of it. It's some part of solving some part of the problem elsewhere as well. So there was a good understanding of how the sequencing of the solutioning might happen and unfold as well.
Right. And tell us about that decision to build both for India and the US. Because, a lot of founders and investors also think that, it's much better to build for one geography and then gradually expand. Or, India is not a deep enough market, so you should probably build outside of India. So, what were some of those decisions at a fundamental level which you ended up taking? Because, you got global investors from day zero, right? So obviously the approach was very differentiated. You did not decide to just build for India, you decided to build for the world. So what were some of the deciding factors for that?
Okay, this is a little more long drawn answer,
Sure.
so I'll give you some more background. I agree. I think for from the start, we were very much aware of what story is being written in India and what story specifically is being seen outside India as well. And the common traits were very strongly correlated. Like when I talked about this feeling of helplessness, like that I want to do something and I want to experiment faster and I want to solve this thing and I want to personalize this experience for this user. This need was felt across the board, right? And for us, um, at least the persona in the company that we inherently were drawn towards was the marketers, the who are creative thinkers planning to hack growth at all times, but somehow in the process essentially are pushed back because their priority in terms of tech and data requirements are always going to be lower than what the product needs and so on and so forth. So that's the common thread we were in general seeing. While e-commerce as well as the checkout piece sounded like a very straight, strong opportunity for us to test this thesis out, when we look at the global market, we are looking at the broader problem of marketing, and how do we sort of make it more seamless, more easy for growth and marketing teams to operate in general. And that theme existed, and we in fact were speaking to people then. In fact, over the last 2 years we've had a lot of conversations and we spend a lot of time in the US as well, just to make sure that whatever way we were seeing the thesis unfold is actually happening or not. So that is broadly the theme in which we started to think about it. The India story has been successful, honestly, and the way we are scaling Shopflo today, we power more than 600 brands in India, and there are so many more yet to come and yet to be powered by us as well. So we will obviously continue building in this direction and making sure that there is a play in India which will unfold as India grows as well as a market. But we keep on taking certain bets outside in the market, and we have seen very successful response so far. Some of it is honestly yet to be built out as product. Some of it is also yet to be sort of talked more about and launched. But there are things that we are sort of planning more to take our approach and make it into a global platform in the first place. Today, we still are limiting our traction to South Asia in some sense.
Got it. And when you talk about these 600 consumer brands, are they very early stage? Like, what is the stage that they end up choosing you? Because, having the experience of seeing what a consumer brand goes through from very early stages and then evolving, I think you are right that, it's typically the performance team or the growth and marketing team as a combination, which will ask for better checkout experiences, right? Because ultimately the ball drops there where, if you're bringing all this traffic to your website and not able to convert, obviously, it has signs that, there is issue with the checkout experience that the users are facing.
Yeah.
So at what stage do you end up partnering with these brands? And then how have you expanded, or, sold, gotten your foot in the door and then expanded your offerings?
Yeah. So we work with brands of all sizes and categories. Um, I think when we try to position ourselves with respect to our play in India, I think what's important to understand is our tool is best suited for brands who have a team in growth and marketing, right? A lot of these brands are actually very early upstarts as well. So they probably don't have dedicated bandwidth to even operate the tool and really take the benefit to the fullest extent. So, where the benefit starts compounding from is when brands have a specific person or a team looking at growth and marketing and making sure, let's say, revenue or LTV by CAC is a metric that's been tracked very aggressively in the company. At the same time, we don't restrict ourselves to this bucket, which is mid and above. Even the smallest brands derive a lot of value out of our product, which is why we have three tiers. So they come in a tier which they can afford and they can quickly take an impact feedback loop as well. And then when they have, found their sort of figured out the basics from there, and then they know what kind of strategy they want to deploy on the cart and checkout experience, they upgrade to the next tier and so on and so forth. But typically, I think aggressively growing companies are best suited to really take the advantage most of our higher plans. To answer your second question, if you can repeat, I think you mentioned there was something around roadmap.
Yes, in terms of, once you've sold the checkout experience, how do you continue to expand your offerings within the brand?
Got it. So Shopflo today, and again, this it's been what 2.5 years since we started building the product, right? And we launched roughly around 2 years back. Um, for the first year, the product was very straightforward that, hey, all your problems of checkout with respect to conversion, we will solve. It was that straight. Just hold us accountable to that number. And most of our brands within a certain duration, let's say 3 or 5 days of onboarding, were able to see a very quick impact. And when you see that kink in the conversion graph, it's clear attribution that, hey, this is what had happened on say, July 4th and whatnot, and Shopflow had come, and now our base conversion has gone up 10-15% easy. Um, the second year was a lot different from the first year because most of the brands stopped thinking about us as just a checkout platform. Our The questions being asked out of the platform and the feature pull was so strong that we ended up kind of moving from just a checkout product to a broader conversion rate optimization platform. And there we started building our own offer engine. We started building our own shipping engine because, like some strategies like free shipping and tiered shipping and whatnot are crucial at checkout as well. Rewards was a product we built. Upsell and cross sell was a product we built. Some of these modules are very differently used by different categories. So everyone now could build their own best checkout versions versus relying on us to provide them a single stack full checkout. So that's one shift that happens, which is now it's so power packed that people are not just focusing on conversion. We are increasing average order values. We are increasing repeat rates, purchase frequency, and whatnot. What's also happening is we are moving a lot upstream. So very recently we are launching our cart. So we are saying that whatever experiences we were powering, not all of them need to be concentrated at checkout. some of them should be able to increase the conversion starting from cart. So how do we sort of go a little further and keep on changing the denominator of the equation that we look at not just people who started at checkout, but also people who showed an intent to buy, and how can Shopflow then help to convert them from there on is the direction we are taking. Uh, there are people who are using our card already and are seeing a good amount of even compounding returns because they have been using our checkout for a while. And now there's an extra delta that's coming from cart, and there is some more stuff that we have planned in this direction as well.
Very interesting. I didn't know that there were so many other verticals that were being in-house. But tell us about, maybe one or two very impactful stories that you've seen personally with these consumer brands after using Shopflow. Where, you don't have to take examples, but just like talk about maybe the jump that happened after they started using you, and then as they expanded across different verticals, what were the improvements for the brands?
Yeah, so I think, Shrishti, so it's full of trade offs, right? Like whatever these brands want, even different teams are optimizing for different metrics, and there is a revenue slash profitability trade offs.
Yeah,
For example, if I had to really just blanket increase conversions, I'll give everyone cash on delivery for free, but my RTOs will go up,
yeah.
right? If I had to increase average order value at every step, I will ask you to buy something else. But because you're making me second guess my purchase, my conversion will go down. So while we have given them the tools, what's been most exciting to see as unfold is these brands are demanding extremely granular analytics from us to identify some of these trade-offs
Right.
and really come up with very crafty ways of managing these trade-offs. That how do I make sure that my prepaid share increases without dropping conversion? How do I make sure that my upsell and cross sell strategy does not impact conversion as well, and so on and so forth? I think that's been quite exciting, and we've seen like even the smallest of brands who have extremely analytical people in their team who continue to amaze us, come up with these things. And honestly, these folks are writing the PRDs to build the next features within Shopflow. So that's been quite exciting. The other behavior that I've seen is a lot of times the problem pull is so strong that they might not even wait for a feature from us. And they have figured out a way to solve that problem through a jugaad themselves. So they
Right.
would figure out that, hey, perhaps I would have loved to tell them about this, card or a bank offer through my discount coupon stack. But back when this was not possible, people were using the checkout banners and even trust badges, just custom editing it and making it look like a card and whatnot, like to power some of these behaviors. And it was quite exciting to see people actually milk value out of the platform. That's when you start really putting more weight to their demands, that there is extreme need to some of these things which they didn't have before, and now when they have the power, they just want to draw more and more impact out of using Shopflow.
How fascinating is that? But, now that you have built that analytical layer and you are possibly, going very deep into that side, what would you say are the most interesting insights that you've personally discovered about the way India shops? Right, like some of the things that we already know that majority is COD, a lot of them result in RTO, those sort of things. But as someone who's seen this behavior at a national level for
Yeah.
multiple consumer brands, for 600 consumer brands, how what are some of the fascinating insights that you would draw about the way India shops?
Honestly, I think the great part that I have realized, and on it, I love looking at data, and my team is extremely data oriented. Um, we've seen that the buying behavior and the intent behavior is very predictable. Um, it's not quite out of whack. If a brand is planning a sale, it's quite non-trivial to predict the spike in traffic that they would get, or how to meet the goals and demands. So it has come to a level where even when someone is buying, looking at where they have come from, like things like have they searched for this product on Google, and whether they are you know, probably buying in the day or the night, or whether they have been a repeat user or a new user, whether they are on an iPhone or a desktop, are very clear indicators to how they will end up converting, whether they are going to pay COD or card, or whether or not they're even going to buy in this session or not. So I think honestly, the biggest exciting and surprising thing for me has been how non-trivial it is to predict intent to buy as well.
Right.
Right? People like us as buyers don't have a lot of time to think about a purchase. If I like something, it's just so easy to just go and buy it. If I don't like it, I know where to meander around the product page, what to look for, perhaps share it into certain WhatsApp groups to take an opinion. All of these are fairly codified behavioral patterns. So we keep seeing this when we are looking at the purchase behavior of these users. And that's been quite interesting to see that, people work in a pattern, and it's while obviously people have their own individual personalities, as a crowd, the behaviors are not very random.
So, could the evolution of Shopflo be from a checkout company to a predicting company in terms of cohort analysis to be able to show who are your highest intent users and buyers?
Yeah, so I won't lie that that's something that we have tried. Uh,
Okay.
I think you would see something exciting in that direction soon.
Okay, very interesting. So as long as it's on the roadmap and consumer brands can benefit from it, I think that's a very exciting thing to share on this episode. But tell us this: currently in the version of Shopflow, how does the business work? Right, like let's talk about the micro in terms of how you make money, and what do the unit economics look like at scale for a business like this? How would you keep expanding your revenue offerings to be able to build a sizable business?
So the business model is quite straightforward. It's almost like because we are growth partners to these brands, depending on the scale of the brand and the tier they have signed up for, they pay us a variable amount as a percentage of their sales. Um, and then there are a set of these modules that I spoke about, the discounts, upsell, and rewards, and whatnot.
Yeah.
They have their own different pricing tiers associated with their complexity. So it's almost like there is an a la carte menu in front of you, and sure, you sign up for the checkout platform, but you want to add a cart to it. You can, take that separately. You want to add more RTO suite to it, you can take it separately, and so on and so forth. Um, so that's broadly the revenue model. I'm forgetting the next question after this.
Just the unit economics in terms of, as you scale, how would that be affected?
Um, so today, I think, and the way to look at it is there is good $3-4 billion of GMV going through D2C channels by these brands. And honestly, this is probably the norm in this space. So everyone is taking a sub 1% GMV share out of it. For us, because we don't have any other obligations with respect to payments, logistics, and whatnot, it's a pure SaaS play for us. From there, it's a typical SaaS P&L.
Got it. Very interesting. And given that, there was so much funding that was raised in this sector, right? Like I remember back in 21, 22, there were many single click checkout companies that were raising funding. I think there were stories in the US of some heavily funded competitors as well. So
Yeah.
how do you think of competition and how has it evolved? Because a lot of noise in the space has quieted down. I think now it's just the serious players who are actually building quietly without attracting too much attention to the sector like Shopflow. So tell us about the space and how it's evolved in terms of competition.
Yeah, honestly, I used to be surprised as at the traction and hype that some of these plays had gotten, especially in the US, where the market had already seen the growth of, let's say, the likes of Apple Pay and Google Pay, really simplifying the checkout experience.
Yeah.
Um, I think on the outset, it looks like all of them are doing the same job. But given that we've been in this industry for some time, everyone is solving for something slightly different from each other. There are players who are, let's say, more consumer focused versus merchant focused, versus there are players who are just completely obsessed about the merchant metrics. There are players who are more aligned to payment side of the part, and there are players who are more aligned to the SaaS upstream conversion part of the part. So the market is slightly divided from a problem statement that they are calling their own. Obviously, ancillary problem statements also get solved,
Yeah.
but what are you really obsessing on as a product tech company is fairly different among all these players. Then there is now, because there is, at least in the Indian market, given that there are a bunch of folks doing it, I think it's very early to say how this evolves. At some level, all these players are competing. At some level, I'm also hearing from our own customers as well as out brands out there that there is a difference in which solution fits for what purpose and what size of customer,
Yeah.
and that's coming up. It's still very notionally built, it's not very set in stone, but I feel like it's the maturity of the market that will need to come a long way till we figure it out and how these players really evolve and build significantly big businesses.
Yeah, I think the interesting fact is that, a consumer brand founder will go and check out multiple options, right? Like they will probably try out different options and then stick to the one that makes the most difference in terms of, driving the impact that they are looking to drive in the business.
Yeah,
But as a founder of the business, there are different spaces that you could have looked at in terms of building payments, logistics, and so many other layers that you could have gone deeper into. But
yeah,
you've chosen the SaaS route,
yeah,
which most investors, and you've been in those conversations, I'm sure that India SaaS market is very capped. You can only grow till say 10 to 12 million dollars in revenue, and then you have to look at other markets. And I'm sure these are conversations that you would have been a part of yourself. So how do you think about choosing the foundational layer of the business, right? Choosing the SaaS play versus like any other place that you could have gone in the direction of.
yeah. No, so we've been fairly positively surprised by the market, honestly. Um, the response that we got from the brands, both in terms of their willingness to adopt SaaS to solve their problems and not depend on people and agencies to solve the same problems, as well as their willingness to pay and actually comply to payment timelines, has been quite good. We haven't struggled on that part at all. And that is one big misconception that we were in as investors, obviously, that, hey, I mean, either people won't pay for software or people won't pay, period.
Yeah.
Uh, None of those things are true, at least for us. And I think the founders that we work with and the brands that we work with really understand the value that we are able to provide. And they act as true partners, not just in the brand's growth, but also in our growth. So we do feel that that relationship has solved some of these usual problems that typically SaaS companies would face. When it comes to the market sizing of it all, honestly, Srishti, we still are in the level where we don't do spreadsheets on that part so much.
Yeah.
I feel like the India bet is a long term bet. You can't be impatient with this market because when it blows up, it will blow up. And for us, you have to be at the forefront of innovation, driving some of those changes when it happens. And the people who are doing cutting edge stuff, really with the brands that are driving that growth, will essentially reap all the benefits. Um, so it's a story yet to unfold, honestly. And I think today, yeah, sure. I mean, I can see that there is a good 10, 15, 20 million opportunity out of, uh, let's say, the space we are in. But this opportunity is growing much faster, not just by the virtue of brands coming in and purchase behavior changing, but also because platforms like ours are also expanding the foothold. What used to be just checkout, click to order completed conversion rate is now a full fledged LTV by CAC equation, right? So that part, our take rates all of those things will change. And I think there is a significantly big market to be captured in the next 4 or 5 years for sure.
I have so much respect for founders who choose to build quietly, even without, some of the times the market wins being in your favor. Because it's what people don't understand in the ecosystem is that it's great to have noise around you,
Yeah,
in the competitive landscape. But most of the business building actually happens in a very boring and unsexy way, where it's not very, in the first few years maybe it won't show immense amount of scale, but once it does blow up, like you said, the whole market will be there for you to capture. But coming back to this equation, since you keep mentioning LTV versus CAC equation for customer founders, I think Shopflo is one company where I encountered that the tagline itself, it focuses so much on conversions, right? So you are very focused on customer success. So how do you think of it internally within the team? How do you incentivize the team to think about customer success?
so we it's been a very developing playbook for us also. I think for us, success internally is divided into three parts. One is how soon can we provide value once the person has signed up on the platform. So there is a team focusing on that. Then there is a team focusing on making sure that once you are working with us, partnering with us day in and day out, how can we be there to introduce you to our product offerings in the right fashion, even like give you suggestions and tricks and some best practices in the industry so that you don't miss out and you don't leave money on the table once, especially once you have signed up on the platform. And then there is the third support team as well, which is just there at all times, answering all queries by your team to solve issues as such. So for us, I think it's just been extremely product tech driven. So you would expect that with 600 brands, there will be a large team solving for it. Um, I think in total, all these three things are done by 6, 7 people at best.
Oh, really? That's so fascinating. Amazing.
So we were 2 people when we were 30 brands strong, and we have just tripled in size when we are 30x in the scale. So we do believe in acting like a product tech company internally as well. So while obviously a lot of these requests and a lot of these help that or help requests that come from the brands are unique and uh, points where we can prove value as service providers to these businesses, we do take that very seriously to build a product around it so that the next time we don't have to throw people at the problem. So I think one part that at least we are really taking seriously internally is that people do appreciate the effort and thought we put into building that product to solve all their needs, to solve the LTV by CAC equation.
That's so fascinating. No wonder it is you who I interacted with when we were exchanging messages about another consumer brand.
Yes.
But that's so interesting. I had no idea that that was the team's strength, managing 600 brands. But there are two things to unpack here. One, how do you hire then? Because you clearly have been able to build talent density to be able to solve a lot of these issues. And secondly, how can Indian founders think more about a product-led growth, right? Instead of throwing people at problems, because that has been where fundamentally most SaaS companies start going wrong, because it's become a very common belief that in India you need to bundle services, so you need to add people to be able to manage the relationship with a particular client. But there are platforms like, for example, AngelList as well, right, which always take that product led approach versus people first approach. So how as a founder was that building journey different for you, and how did you decide on that?
Yeah, I have a very crude answer to that. In fact, this question comes across internally also, right? These are battles that you have to fight internally because
Yeah.
everyone will be like, hey, we are struggling here. Why don't we add one more person? I think for us, it's again, in general, I do believe as a personally as well that a lot of these problems, especially in terms of customer success, are fairly seasonal or cyclical. They are either spiked because of a certain issue or a certain kind of thing that we did and whatnot, There is always a reason which is cyclical and seasonal, in my understanding. One can again get into a firefighting mode and figure out either to increase capacity or solve that problem just by replicating the same playbook that they have been doing. Um, for us, what's come out to be true, as well as something that we continue to believe very strongly, is if you have a good product, most of these things get solved.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and again, that's what I feel SaaS is all about, right? If it was supposed to be services, why would someone build software in the first place? So the thing with services is the more you scale it, the less you have a reason to build a better product, right? Then you start thinking about problems as product problems and operational problems separately.
Yeah.
For us, how we try to think about it is we don't want to take that excuse at all. The moment we start thinking that, hey, what process should we set, and perhaps two layers we should set, and there should be a maker checker and whatnot, the less our approach will be thinking towards product in the first place. So it's almost like an artificial constraint you have to put in yourself as a team, that hey, what is the product solved to it? And if and only if we have completely failed as a product team to solve this problem, which hopefully and thankfully, because of the quality of folks out there in this office is great, we are not, we should be fine.
And the second question was, who are these people and how did you hire them? What are the criteria in your mind when you're hiring for the best team fit?
With respect to customer success, I think let me be a little fair and saying that, okay, there are these few seven odd people who would be at the forefront doing things. But I think the rest of the 35, 40 folks are also there to support them. I think the biggest value that we get out of the customer success setup here is the short feedback loops. The more there is stat dependency on teams, and you have to set up calls and create tickets and whatnot, I think the slower is the product build speed, as well as the worse is the quality as well. So
Yeah.
obviously these are the folks in the customer success team, but there are, I think everyone else is quite driven to solve customer problems as well. Um, Good quality folks, I think what we are focused on is people who really believe in surely the mission, but missions can change in early stage startup. So these folks should just enjoy working with each other. So I think we have really focused on the cultural aspect of it. Like if you're turning up to work at whatever AM in the morning, you should be excited, obviously, for the challenge you're trying to solve that day. But the people around you should motivate you to work and solve problems better as well. So that's something that we have made sure that the quality of people in general is quite high.
Got it. And, Tiger Global was a dream name to have on the cap table for many founders. Some of my portfolio companies also went on to raise from them as well. As a fund, they're quite fascinating to outsiders because of the legacy that they come from. What has your experience been of working with Tiger Global as a founder? And how did you stitch that round so quietly and hush hush?
Tough question, honestly. So will be let me answer the second part first. Um, so I agree. I think honestly, actually, on the first part itself, I think they've been great partners, especially given that we were always looking at a global play. The questions that we have been asked by them, not just when we were raising the round, but also in our subsequent discussions, have been phenomenal. And at least given that I've been on the other side, the quality of questions have been like just made us, uh, you know, think harder about the why, more on why we are doing this and why we should be doing this and whatnot. So I think that level of guidance has been immensely helpful, and they've been in general quite helpful with respect to industry related stuff there as well, because they
Yeah.
actually look at multiple industries from a quite an authoritative point of view. Um, on the round, I think back in 2021, when we were in the process of, as I told you, like working with these brands and figuring out the problems that they are trying to solve, when some of these people themselves started to say that, hey, because we are completely aligned and we want you to solve this problem for ourselves, we want to invest in you. Sort of an angel or an early round started growing up. Um, and then soon some of these VCs also started talking, and we were like, great. I mean, anyway, it's going to be a competitive space. Might as well get into some capital to build some early traction very quickly. At that point of time, we were obviously very much focused on building this as a global play from day one. So a lot of these angels that we were in touch with, and a lot of conversations we were having were obviously with folks outside India as well. So there, some of these conversations started brewing when we started hearing from funds which were US based or global as well. And some of these introductions, mutual introductions, and excitement led to larger names in the pool, and this round ended up stretching to a good 2.6 million round.
Interesting. And let's talk about how being an investor transformed you as a founder. What were the insights you gained during your time in venture capital that have helped you as a founder? And what are some of the things that what you had to unlearn from your VC experience to go be able to go back to being a founder?
I think the second question is much more relevant
Yeah.
uh, because you do have to unlearn a lot, right? For close to 2 years, when I used to work with a VC, um, there are a lot of things that you build as traits. Just because you have to operate at a level of just talking to 1,000 companies in a year and understanding what they do, and hopefully not sound stupid in front of those founders, as well as giving them a yes or a no basis, how excited you are and your fund's thesis is with respect to their play. So that builds some level of, in general, pessimism. Like, you start seeing the reasons to reject before the reason, the optimistic part of building a beautiful play there. So I think just letting go of that and learning how to take a leap of faith has been the biggest learning in general. But apart from that, obviously, I really enjoyed my experience as a VC. The energy that you had day in and day out, infected by the enthusiasm of a lot of these founders who were, completely focused on their mission. That's something that I really absorbed. And honestly, that is the biggest reason at a time when I had completed close to 2 years, I decided to, take the plunge myself.
And how is it different from the first time around? Because you were a founder before that as well, right? So, what changed in you personally when you went back?
So that I have very trouble. I have a good amount of trouble justifying that startup stint because I was still in college, right? I mean, we had a team of what at its peak we had 14 odd people, but most of them were college students. So it's very, like, we were excited about building a product and solving a problem. But as a founder, then we really sucked at building an organization, how to build a company, and so on and so forth. So this time it was completely different, right? It seemed like you were pushed into the big boys league immediately after getting your hands dirty with starting up very early on. But the great part is that that stint that I had in college also was quite exciting. I think the um, ability to think through solutions and really just you felt like you've tasted blood when you've solved a problem for someone. And after that, every year I've tried to start up again, and it took me 4 years to build the right skill set or confidence to go in the market
Yeah.
building something again. So I think that was beneficial in its own way.
And I think people don't fully appreciate it, right? I've seen analysts and associates get so much flack at funds because ultimately you are not the decision maker, and because of that, a lot of people, young folks in venture, end up having a lot of existential crisis. They're
Yeah.
like, we are not valued enough in this fund. Should we go out build our own company? And I've had these conversations multiple times with people working at funds where they're figuring out what is the right career path for them. Is it being an operator or being an investor, so that you can eventually climb up the ladder? but everyone understands that that's a very long term cycle. So now that you've experienced both, what would you say that has been what would you say has been the most fundamental learning experience for you? Is it the operator founder role versus the investor role, or are there pros and cons to both?
I think it has to be timed well. And I think it could be an unpopular opinion, but I feel like there is this level of emotional maturity you need to reach to become a good founder also. So all of it is not about just serendipity hitting you and you found and stumbled upon a good idea. I feel like, at least from where I look at it, uh, people should have the understanding of where they are as people in their own personal growth journeys. In my case, I lucked out with VC because I was in my most curious phase where I felt like I knew everything, but I felt like I didn't have a shit filter on my ideas. So it just feels like you have to solve for yourself and figure out where you're lacking. There is no one answer. Some people benefit out of just trying shit out and uh, failing fast, learning, building so many times to really hit the nail the right time. But yeah, I think everyone has their own individual journeys. But specifically, I feel like people should just be a little more introspective about what they specifically have and what they specifically don't to decide which route works better.
Yeah, look inwards, I think, is always a good answer to that. But what's driving your entrepreneurial spirit? Where can you trace back your entrepreneurial inclination to? What were some of the childhood experiences that led you towards having entrepreneurial aspirations?
Quite a sad answer there. Not a lot. Didn't have anyone around me running a business, not in family, nowhere close to. Um, or even in school, didn't have a lot of that experience. I think college was when, I spent my most of my childhood in Ranchi. And then when I moved to Bombay for the first time in college, um, the amount of exposure that was there, and you could probably because of the brand of the college and a little bit of your confidence that you'll have to fake at times, you could do anything, right? And the city allows you to do anything, and that was probably the switch for me. I had gone into a college thinking I'll be a very fantastic aerospace engineer, do a PhD out there and work in a lab somewhere. All of this changed because of the experiences I got in the college. Honestly, I feel like that has a lot to do with the early sparks, but not a lot more in childhood specifically.
Interesting. And what would the young Ishan have wanted to do back in school, college?
Oh, I wanted to get into like extremely like physics and aerospace as much as possible. Like even in college, I kept doing a lot of stuff close to subject. I extended my BTech into a dual degree just because I wanted to complete the project I was at while running the startup I had started. So I was obviously torn between the two options, but initially that was the plan.
Interesting. And coming to the last question, what's your personal ambition for Shopflow? What's the North Star that you're working towards?
To make a very big business.
So, any ideas on scale, size? A lot of founders have different aspirations that they put on their vision board. What is that number for you?
I don't think the number motivates me personally so much. I know that hey, it'll be great to make. Today I was looking through a Network 18 report of how many years Berkshire Hathaway took to reach $1 trillion valuation, and Apple took, and Microsoft took, and whatnot. I mean, all of those are great metrics, but you won't even remember that when you wake up or sleep, right? So for us, we obsess over 100 million revenue target that we want to achieve in short or midterm, and then we'll see what happens after that.
100 million is a great number as well. So, more power to you as you go towards that. Coming on to the last segment, this is rapid fire. Keep your answers short and quick, and it's going to be super easy, so don't worry. Are there any books, podcasts, or resources that have had a profound impact on your life or career?
Career, I do love most of the content that comes through Lenny's channel.
Yeah.
Just as a product person, it just like it's great to geek out on that. Also, gives you some affirmation of, hey, the way you're thinking is also the way some other folks are thinking. Otherwise, how often do you have those high level conversations out there?
Yeah.
Book wise, I have struggled to read books, honestly, and my highest annual count has been two. Uh, I do end up hearing about books. Like when someone is reading a book, I would just want to learn what that person has learned versus the book itself. But there is a book that I had read long back and that I really kept on going back to. This was called Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Yeah.
Um, it was
Love
quite
that.
interesting, quite lovely for, the, it was a short book, but at least the amount of depth and thought I gained before and after I'd read the book was insane. And I keep going back to some of those thoughts.
Yeah, I love that book personally as well. One professional and one personal goal over the next year.
Um, so honestly, my professional goals are pretty much tied to the company.
Get to $100 million.
Personal goal, I feel this year I've tried to get into some fitness related activities. Had planned to participate in the half Ironman in October,
Oh,
but
very nice.
unfortunately had to drop out because of some personal reason. But getting to some of those pieces, I picked up cycling for the first time this year. So just doing long distance cycling or swimming as part of the entire, triathlon pack. Uh,
Yeah, even I love that. I've also trained for the half Ironman. I think it takes a lot of effort. It took me 8 months to get to that distance. Which person has had the most formative impact on your life?
um, yeah, I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately. I think I probably haven't lived enough life to really see long term impact from a specific person. I do feel that I inherit a lot of my traits that I appreciate about myself from my father. So 100% that. But yeah, I think it's still very early.
What are those traits?
I think the way I think, especially the fact that, yeah, especially at least the fact that there is so much chaos around you. And, my father keeps on saying, जब तक जान पे नहीं आती है तब तक कोई परेशानी नहीं है.
Yeah.
I feel like that is a very calming thought in general, that all of these problems and firefighting and chaos is just numbers and superficial stuff. We stick to the basics and get our things should be fine.
Yeah, I think the word for us in that world is resilience, right? So in a way, just
100%.
living life with resilience. If you were to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Uh, Going with the flow.
Love it. What are you most proud of?
Hmm. Oh, that's a tough one as well. I think honestly, I keep talking to my partner and she keeps making me realize what we have built with Shopflo, even though it's still not there where we want it to be, has been quite substantial. And, just seeing people happy, motivated, extremely driven around us it's something I did not expect when I started. So it's been so far the proudest, and hopefully it keeps on increasing in intensity.
And absolutely, I can testify to that, there's immense customer love for the product that you've built. So there's definitely a very strong community of founders who will keep championing you. What's the kindest thing that anyone's ever done for you? I promise this is the last one.
I actually don't have an answer to this one, unfortunately.
Okay, no worries. We can
I
skip
think a
it.
lot of people have been quite kind in this journey, right? I feel being a founder puts you in so many unique problems for the first time. And for every small problem, I know that there are X set of people who I can just ping for this problem and they'll just take all their time out to help me out. Um, but that's just in the founder stint of 2.5 years. I'm sure there are too many moments of kindness I have been on the receiving end of previous to that as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Ishan, for coming on board. It was a lovely conversation. I think a lot of people will learn a lot of new insights about consumer behavior in India and also how consumer brands are being built in the country, because I remember a time where it used to be a big question mark about India being able to create 500 crore, 1000 crore brands.
Yeah.
And and now I think that question has gone away because there are multiple success stories, but obviously behind that change has been the seamless checkout experiences that companies like Shopflo are driving. So more power to you for driving India's digital commerce revolution, and hope you continue scaling beautifully and get to your goals of 100 million and beyond in revenue.